The Mysterious Twins Part 10.
Patricia and Jack were at the cafeteria, eating and discussing Sassa's speedy recovery. Jack was contemplating whether to open up about the document he was asked to sign before releasing JJ. "Jack, what's wrong?" Patricia asked, concerned. "You look worried." As Jack began to explain, saying, "A few minutes before you came to the reception," his talk was abruptly interrupted by one of the nurses who rushed into the hospital cafeteria, searching frantically for Patricia. "I have been looking for you. Sassa was almost kidnapped, but the kidnapper was caught," the nurse exclaimed as she spotted them. Both Patricia and Jack sprang from their seats and rushed out, with Jack sprinting ahead towards Sassa's ward, leaving Patricia behind. Tears streamed down Patricia's face as she ran to see Sassa, while the nurse reassured her, "Sassa is safe now." As they were moving towards the building, Bobby, who had left the hospital earlier in the afternoon, drove into the parking lot. Patricia, breathless and frantic, ran to him. "Bobby, there was an attempted kidnapping of Sassa. I haven't seen her yet, but Jack has gone to the ward." Bobby's face turned pale with concern, and he quickly followed Patricia towards the ward, his mind racing with worrying about Sassa's safety. Inside the ward, Dr. Glory, the medical director, was already there, overseeing the situation. She was furious, but also relieved that Sassa was safe. "How could this happen under our watch?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. She questioned the police on duty. "Dr. Hakim has been one of our trusted doctors. I can't believe this." Patricia and Bobby reached Sassa's room, their hearts pounding. They found Jack standing by Sassa's bed, holding her hand protectively. His face was a mix of relief and fury. "Sassa is fine, but we need to find out who is behind this," he said, his voice firm. Bobby and Patricia's faces were etched with worrying and anger. Patricia's voice quivered as she said, "How could someone try to take our daughter? We need answers." Bobby's expression was dark and resolute. "We need to find out what's going on. If a high-profile doctor like Dr. Hakim could do something like this, then who can we trust? Why is everyone targeting our daughter?" Dr. Glory spoke up, her tone serious. "Dr. Hakim was known for honesty and his friendship with Sassa was good, but I don't know why he should be against Sassa now. He claims he was trying to protect Sassa, but we need to investigate further." Bobby's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Dr. Hakim." Patricia, still teary-eyed, added, "We need to get to the bottom of this. If Dr. Hakim was trying to help, we should hear him out. But if he wasn't, then the authorities should make him speak out." Jack nodded in agreement. "We'll get to the truth. But right now, the most important thing is that Sassa is safe. I think the whole ordeal has made her so weak again that she went back into a coma." As they all looked at Sassa, who was still unconscious but stable, the room was filled with a mix of relief and lingering fear. They promised never to leave her side again.
At the police station,
Inspector Pella was both surprised and furious at Dr. Hakim's alleged involvement in the conspiracy against Dr. Sassa. Steaming with anger, he demanded, "Speak up. Who sent you? Where were you taking Dr. Sassa? And who are you working for?" Dr. Hakim, visibly shaken but resolute, repeated, "Dr. Sassa's life is in danger. You need to act on this information first. I have evidence on my phone." "I have evidence on my phone." He explained how he had overheard two policemen discussing their plan to remove Sassa from the equation. "To policemen? You mean we have moles planted at the hospital?" Inspector Pella asked, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Yes," Hakim replied urgently. "Please, you need to protect her. They were planning something terrible for tonight." Inspector Pella, realizing the gravity of the situation, promised, "I will do everything in my power to keep Sasa safe. But you need to give me something tangible to work with. Where's your phone?" Dr. Hakim looked around frantically. "It was right in my pocket. I must have lost it during the commotion." Inspector Pella's frustration mounted, but he took a deep breath. "All right, the only way to prove your innocence is to work with us. We will plant our gadgets on your body, and you will disguise as a new policeman assigned to the hospital. Help us identify the two you claim to see. Since we couldn't find your phone, you must try to identify them and gather evidence. We will monitor all your activities from the office to ensure your safety and the success of the assignment." Back in the hospital, Dr. Hakim and another officer were brought into the hospital that same night as new officers, but no one at the hospital knew that one of them was Dr. Hakim. He quickly mixed with the other officers as they patrolled and tried to remember the faces of the ones he had seen earlier, planning to eliminate Sasa, but he couldn't. Dr. Hakim felt weak after moving up and down around Sasa's ward, keeping an eye on her. He decided to get some rest and sat beside the policemen who were already seated and looking worn out. As soon as he sat down, he fell asleep. The two policemen, who had stopped talking when he sat down, resumed their conversation when they noticed he was sound asleep. "I didn't know how that doctor got to know about our plans. The man wanted to spoil everything, but thank goodness they have brought Sasa back," one of them said. The other responded, "I think we should change our plans and make her death easier since she's still in a coma. Ending her should be easy for us." "Our original plan should still be the best," the first one replied. "I have already gotten my doctor's clothes ready to disguise as one of them, so injecting the poison into her system should be easy for me." Dr. Hakim, awake but pretending to sleep, heard part of their conversation. One of them accidentally bumped into him, causing Hakim to stay alert while pretending to remain asleep. He decided to monitor them closely. Jack was pacing the hospital hallway, his mind in turmoil. A call came through, reminding him of the countdown to the 7 hours given to sign the documents. He pleaded for more time, assuring them he would sign the documents and get his child, JJ, released. He had wanted to discuss the situation with Sasa, but given her health condition, he knew he had to make the decision fast for the sake of their child. As he was ruminating over it, his phone rang. It was Joy. "Hello. Joy, it's been a while." "Yes, it has. I got busy, but I'm free now." "How are you?" Joy replied. "I'm fine. What about you?" Jack asked, sensing something off in her tone. Joy's voice turned angry. "You didn't even bother to ask about our baby. I have been the only one coping with the pregnancy. It's unfair." Jack sighed. "I pleaded with you to abort for the sake of my marriage, but you refused. I have a lot of issues at hand. Joy, please try to understand me." Joy responded with a strained sigh. "Jack, I need your help." Jack's concern grew. "What's wrong? Joy, are you okay?" Joy sounded weak. "I've been having sharp pains in my tummy. I don't know what's wrong." Jack felt a surge of panic. "Please hang on. Joy, I'll be right there." Jack quickly drove to Joy's house. On arriving, he found her lying on the couch, looking pale. "Joy, are you okay?" he asked, rushing to her side. Joy managed to speak. "I've been having a sharp pain in my tummy. I don't know what's wrong." Jack sat beside her, trying to show care. Joy slowly got up, walked to the door, and locked it. "I've missed you, Jack. Now that I'm feeling like this, I need you around." Jack shook his head. "I've been in the hospital taking care of Sasa. I can't stay here. I need to be with her to ensure nothing goes wrong." Joy's eyes flashed with a mixture of hurt and determination. "Oh, you must be tired. Let me get you something to eat." She went to the kitchen, returning with some snacks and a drink. Jack ate the snacks and drink without suspicion. Within minutes, he felt drowsy and his vision blurred. As he slipped into unconsciousness, Joy smiled. "I have you to myself again," she whispered. She took his phone, put it on silent, and tossed it aside. With Jack now having deep sleep, Joy's demeanor shifted. She caressed his face and whispered, "This is what you get for neglecting me."
Back in the hospital.
Bobby and Patricia, exhausted from worrying and lack of sleep, were dozing off on the bench beside Sasa's bed. The dim lighting cast long shadows in the room, creating an atmosphere of tension and unease. Suddenly, the door to Sasa's private ward creaked open, and a doctor in a white coat walked in, holding a syringe. The sound of footsteps roused Bobby and Patricia from their light sleep. Their eyes fluttered open, trying to shake off the grogginess. Bobby got up, his protective instincts kicking in. "Thanks so much for the care," he said. The doctor nodded, his face partially hidden by the shadows. "Just be calm, sir. Your daughter will be fine," he replied in a soothing voice. As the doctor approached Sasa's bed, he reached out to pull back the blanket, ready to administer the injection. However, he froze when he realized that the figure beneath the blanket was not Sasa, but a cleverly arranged pile of pillows and clothes. His eyes widened in shock and confusion. Bobby, now fully alert, stepped closer. "Where is Sasa?" the doctor demanded, his voice tinged with frustration and panic. At that moment, two police officers emerged from behind the curtains on the side of the ward. One of them stepped forward, flashing a badge. "You are under arrest for attempting murder," he said, his voice firm and unyielding. The doctor, now visibly nervous, stammered, "I'm a doctor assigned to be here at this time. You've got it all wrong." Before he could say more, Inspector Pella stormed into the ward, his expression a mix of anger and determination. Without hesitation, he slapped the doctor across the face. "William, you are under arrest for disguising as a doctor to kill Sasa," Pella declared, his voice echoing in the small room. The syringe and vial, which had fallen to the floor in the commotion, were quickly picked up by one of the officers, who placed it in an evidence bag. "This will be taken for analysis," the officer said, sealing the bag. Bobby and Patricia stood frozen, their hearts pounding. Patricia's eyes welled up with tears as she said, "I doubted them initially when they told us that a fake doctor was coming in here to kill my child," she sighed. "Where is Sasa? I hope she's very fine," she cried out, her voice breaking. Inspector Pella turned to them, his expression softening slightly. "We moved Sasa to a very secure location. She will be brought back here shortly. She's safe, I promise," he reassured them. "Just be on alert. Don't leave her to herself." Bobby clenched his fists, his face a mask of fury. "Who sent you? Who's behind this?" he demanded, stepping toward William. The fake doctor, now handcuffed, remained silent, his face pale. Pella nodded to the officers, who began to lead William out of the room. "We'll get the answers. Just give us full support. We won't stop until we find out who's behind this." Dr. Glory entered the room, having been alerted to the situation. "Bring Sasa back into the room," she instructed the medical personnel. Patricia, tears streaming down her face, held Bobby's hand tightly. Bobby, his jaw set, looked directly at Inspector Pella. "We appreciate everything you're doing. Please, make sure our daughter stays safe," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Pella nodded, his expression one of solidarity and promise. "We'll get to the bottom of this. No one will harm Sasa on my watch." As Sasa was carefully wheeled back into the room, the atmosphere shifted from one of intense fear to a mix of relief and determination. Bobby and Patricia rushed to her side, their hands gently touching her, reassuring themselves of her safety. Inspector Pella addressed the assembled hospital staff and officers. "We're stepping up security measures around the clock. No one gets near Sasa without proper clearance. We will root out every threat and ensure her safety." Dr. Glory added, "We'll be vigilant. Our priority is Sasa's recovery and safety."
At the police station.
Inspector Pella invited Dr. Hakim into his office. Still dressed in the police uniform, Dr. Hakim looked tired but relieved. Pella motioned for him to sit and began speaking. "Dr. Hakim, I appreciate your efforts in helping us get the mole arrested," Pella said, his tone sincere. "But there's more to this. You are not yet free from acting as a police officer until the suspect tells us everything we need to know." Dr. Hakim nodded, his expression serious. "I understand, Inspector. I'm glad I was able to help save Sasa, and I promise to do whatever it takes to assist further." Inspector Pella leaned forward, his eyes intense. "For your safety and the success of this assignment, you must keep your identity hidden from everyone else. Can I count on you for that?" Hakim smiled and nodded. "Of course, I'll do whatever is necessary." Pella allowed himself a brief smile. "We might even decide to retain you here as a police officer. You seem to have a knack for it," he said jokingly. Dr. Hakim chuckled. "If only you would allow me to continue dressing in my white jacket as a police officer." Then Inspector handed Hakim a small device. "This is a wire. You'll wear it at all times. We need to catch every word, every whisper. Your role is crucial." As Dr. Hakim left the office, he felt the weight of the task ahead. The hospital, once a place of healing and comfort, had become a battleground. But he was ready to do whatever it took to protect Sasa and uncover the truth.
At the hospital.
Bobby and Patricia stayed by her side, their faces etched with worry and exhaustion. Patricia turned to Bobby, her voice trembling. "Do you think they'll catch everyone involved? Do you think we can ever feel safe again?" Bobby squeezed her hand. "We have to trust that they will. Inspector Pella won't rest until he gets to the bottom of this, and neither will we." Patricia sighed, her eyes filled with concern. "Let me check on Jack. He was at the reception last night, and he wasn't even aware of everything that happened to Sasa. It all happened so fast." Bobby nodded. "Okay, I'll be right here." Patricia made her way to the reception, her footsteps echoing in the dimly lit hallway. She approached the nurse on duty, her voice filled with urgency. "Have you seen Jack? He was here last night." The nurse shook her head. "I haven't seen him since my shift started. Maybe he's catching some sleep somewhere in the hospital." Patricia nodded, her worrying deepening. "Thank you." Patricia returned to the ward, her mind racing with thoughts of Jack's whereabouts. She entered the room, and Bobby looked up expectantly. "We need to wait until morning to know whether he's somewhere in the hospital catching some sleep," Patricia said, her voice tinged with anxiety. Bobby frowned. "It's not like Jack to disappear like this. I'm getting worried." Patricia paced the room, her mind unable to rest. What if something happened to him? What if he's in trouble too? Bobby stood up, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find him. Let's not jump to conclusions. He could be anywhere in the hospital. Maybe he just needed some time to process everything."
At Sasa's house.
Zara was deep in sleep when the persistent ringing of her phone woke her up. Gradually, she reached for it, her voice thick with sleep as she answered, "Hello." A male voice from the other end, urgent and direct, said, Sasa escaped death last night and a mole was arrested. Zara's eyes snapped open, her sleepiness vanishing instantly. That's unbelievable. Who is trying to kill her again? She asked, her voice rising in panic. The caller abruptly ended the call without further explanation. Zara sat up in bed, her heart racing. She quickly dialed another number. Hello, who tried to kill Sasa? I was told she almost got killed last night. A voice on the other end responded? Yes, it was one of the moles working for Boss who did that. Zara's voice trembled with frustration. I thought having JJ as bait was enough for the boss to get what he wanted. The person on the other end, Agatha, replied sternly, Zara, are you questioning boss actions? Realizing her mistake, Zara quickly backtracked. Oh, I'm sorry, Agatha. Actually, I called to know if we were the ones responsible. Agatha's tone remained cold. Just focus on your task, Zara. Zara ended the call, her mind racing with fear and frustration. She remembered her boss' ominous warning, if you are caught, you are erased. She shuddered at the thought. Another man was about to go down, and she knew she had to stay alert to survive. Her mind drifted to her personal vendetta. Whatever happened to Sasa is fine. She muttered to herself, pacing the room, I need access to Jack. With Sasa out of the way, Jack will be mine. I must fulfill my goal of getting pregnant for him. Jack staying far from me is not helpful. Suddenly, an idea struck her. She grabbed her phone and called one of her contacts within the organization. Listen, I need information on the current security details at the hospital. I need to find a way to get in. The voice on the other end hesitated. Zara, that's risky. The security is tight, especially after what happened last night. Zara's voice was sharp. Just get me the information. I have a plan.
At the hospital.
Patricia and Bobby's anxiety grew with each passing minute. Their wait seemed endless. They called Jack's phone repeatedly, but it kept ringing with no response. Their worry turned into panic as the hours dragged on. Patricia, unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, said to Bobby, we have to inform Inspector Pella about Jack's sudden disappearance. Bobby nodded in agreement. Yes, we need help to find him. Patricia dialed Inspector Pella's number, her hands trembling. When he answered, she spoke quickly, her voice shaking. Inspector, we haven't seen Jack since last night. We're really worried. Inspector Pella's face grew serious as he listened. I understand your concern. I'll have my team look into it immediately. In the meantime, stay with Sasa. We'll find him, he reassured them. As Patricia hung up the phone, she turned to Bobby. Inspector Pella is on it. We need to stay strong for Sasa. Bobby put his arm around her. We will. Jack is smart. He'll be okay. Let's focus on being here for Sasa.
At Joy's house.
Jack woke up beside Joy, his mind racing with worrying. He checked the time on his watch. It was already past 9 a.m. He turned to Joy, who was still sleeping peacefully beside him. Panic set in as he realized how much time had passed. Joy, you trapped me again, he said, shaking her gently to wake her up. Joy stirred and slowly opened her eyes. Far from that, she murmured. I was feeling lonely and sick, and I needed you to be around me. Jack's frustration was palpable. But I told you how important it was for me to be around Sasa, he snapped, suddenly remembering his phone. Where is my phone? Joy reached under her pillow and handed it to him. I noticed you needed rest, so I put it on silence. Jack shook his head, exasperated. When will you change? She responded with a sly smile. The day you put a ring on my finger, I will turn a new leaf. Remember how you met Sasa? I masterminded everything. I planned it for my good. Jack's eyes widened in shock. What are you talking about? Joy leaned in, her voice low and conspiratorial. Flashback. Jack, we were planning our wedding, and I got to know a young millionaire. Anxious to date him, I diverted the money meant for our wedding plans to position myself in a social class that would afford me the opportunity of meeting him. Sasa was one of my friends and she had money, so I systematically and stylishly planned your meeting. Jack was incredulous. You made her meet me at the time I needed help. Yes, Joy continued. I knew you were not in love with her at the beginning, and that's why I made your manager sack you. I wanted Sasa to be your only hope, to ensure you would cling to her since she had a multinational company she was struggling to put in place at that time. Jack cut in, his voice rising. So, you were behind the issue I had at work that time. They almost got me arrested for doing nothing. Joy nodded, unfazed by his anger. Yes, I was the one behind the scene. Sasa was supposed to fill in a gap for me in your heart until I got back. I'm back now to occupy my space, so please don't say no, because it might be very dangerous. Jack was taken aback, his mind reeling from the revelations. Joy, this is insane. You can't just manipulate people's lives like this. Joy's expression turned cold. I can and I did. Jack, and now, you have to make a choice. Stay with me, or face the consequences. Jack's phone buzzed, with several missed calls and messages from Patricia, Bobby, and Inspector Pella. He realized he needed to act fast. Joy, I need to go back to the hospital. Sasa's life is in danger. Joy's eyes flashed with anger. If you leave now, don't expect me to wait around for you. You know what I'm capable of. Jack's heart pounded. He knew he had to get back to Sasa, but Joy's threats loomed large in his mind. I'll be back, but this conversation isn't over. At the police station, Inspector Pella quickly gathered his team. We have a new priority. Jack is missing, and we need to find him. Start by checking the hospital security footage from last night and trace his last known movements. The team sprang into action, reviewing footage and making calls. The urgency was clear. They had to find Jack before something went terribly wrong. Inspector Pella's team combed through the security footage and discovered Jack leaving the hospital late at night. One officer reported, "Sir, it looks like he left in a hurry. We need to follow up on where he went." Just as they were piecing together Jack's last known whereabouts, Inspector Pella decided to try calling Jack's phone one more time. This time, to his relief, Jack answered. Pella's eyes narrowed. "Jack, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Jack answered, sounding a bit tired but otherwise fine. "Yes, I'm very fine." "Where are you? You got us worried," Pella pressed. "Oh, I'm sorry. My attention was needed somewhere last night, so I rushed out, but I couldn't make it back to the hospital. It got quite late," Jack responded. Inspector Pella sighed with relief but remained cautious. "All right, just make your way back to the hospital as soon as you can." "I will. I'm on my way," Jack assured him. Inspector Pella immediately called Patricia to inform her of the good news. "Patricia, Jack is fine. He got caught up in something urgent last night, but he's already on his way back to the hospital." Patricia's face lit up with relief. "Thank you, Inspector. We were so worried." Bobby, overhearing the conversation, let out a deep breath. "That's a huge relief. I can't believe he's okay." Shortly after, Jack arrived at the hospital. His appearance showed signs of the rough night he had, but he was safe and sound. As soon as Patricia saw him, she rushed to him, holding his hand tightly. "Jack, we were so scared." "Where were you?" Patricia exclaimed. Jack's face filled with remorse. I'm so sorry. I had to rush out for something urgent, and I didn't realize how worried everyone would be. Bobby joined them, his expression a mix of relief and frustration. Next time, let someone know before you disappear like that. Jack nodded. I will. I promise. It won't happen again. Inspector Pella entered the room, his expression serious, but relieved. Jack, we're glad you're back safely. You need to be more careful. There are too many dangers lurking around right now. We can't afford any more close calls. Jack nodded, fully understanding the gravity of the situation. I know, Inspector. I won't let my guard down again, I promise.
The interrogation room.
Meanwhile, in the interrogation room, the atmosphere was starkly different. The fake doctor, William, sat in a metal chair, his hands cuffed to the table. Two officers stood guard at the door while Inspector Pella entered the room, his demeanor shifting to one of steely resolve. Pella sat down across from William, his gaze unwavering. You know why you're here, he began, and you know that cooperating is your best chance. William's face was pale, his eyes darting around the room. I've not done anything, he muttered, but there was a tremor in his voice. Pella leaned forward, his voice low and menacing. You were caught red-handed. The syringe, the vial, the disguise, everything points to your involvement. We know there are others, and we will find them. The only question is, will you help us, or will you go down alone? William swallowed hard, his facade of defiance beginning to crack. I was just following orders, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Pella nodded, leaning back. Whose orders? Who are you working for? William's eyes darted around the room, his fear palpable. Please, I'm sorry. Pardon me this time. Pella's smile was cold. Do you think this is a minor case? A police officer who turned into a mole. You're in deep trouble, and the only way out is to start talking. Just then, Pella's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw it was Dr. Hakim. There's something I must discuss with you right away. Hakim's voice was urgent. Pella excused himself from the room, instructing the guards to keep a close watch on William. In his office, Pella invited Hakim inside. What's so urgent? He asked. Dr. Hakim looked serious. You need to inquire about the document they dropped for Jack. That was part of the conversation I overheard the night I got arrested. We need to know what it is. Jack might be under threat and it could be very dangerous. Pella nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I'll look into it right away. He headed back to the interrogation room, his mind racing with new information. Pella re-entered the room, his demeanor even more intense. Whose orders are you following? He demanded again, and who dropped a document for Jack? William hesitated, then finally spoke. I was sent to drop a document beside Jack when he was sleeping at the reception. By who? Pella pressed, his patience thinning. Who are the other officers you are working with? William fell silent again, his eyes filled with fear. Pella's frustration grew, but he kept his composure. You will talk to me, sooner or later, he said, his voice cold and certain. I'll be right back. Pella stepped out of the interrogation room and immediately called Jack, demanding his presence at the police station. Jack was moving into Sass's ward when he received the call and informed Patricia and Bobby about it. They were surprised at the sudden invitation. Jack stood up, reassuring them, I promise to be back soon. On arrival at the police station, Inspector Pella invited him into his office and demanded to know about the documents he found beside him at the hospital reception. Jack fell silent, his mind racing with thoughts of the threat surrounding the document and JJ's safety. Inspector Pella noticed his hesitation and said, I know you might have been threatened, but don't worry, we'll take care of it all. Jack sighed heavily. JJ's life is more important to me at this time. I spoke with my son, and he pleaded with me to bring him home. I was given 7 hours to sign the documents, but with Sasa in a coma, I couldn't discuss it with her, and that was the reason it was still pending. Inspector Pella leaned forward, his expression intense. Let me see the document. Jack went to his car and retrieved the document, handing it to Pella. The inspector stared at the papers, shaking his head in disbelief. Who is this person, and why do they want this in exchange for JJ? Pella looked up, his eyes locking with Jack's. We need your unwavering support to get JJ back safely. Trust me, we won't let them hurt your son. Jack's phone buzzed, and he saw a new message. We are running out of patience. Sign the documents now or say goodbye to JJ. Jack's hand trembled as he handed the phone to Inspector Pella. Pella read the message and then looked back at Jack. We need to act fast. Tell me everything you know about these people. Any detail could help. Jack took a deep breath. I want to let you in, but I'm terrified they'll hurt JJ. Pella placed a reassuring hand on Jack's shoulder. We won't let that happen, but you need to trust us and follow our lead. We'll bring JJ back safely and take down these people.
At the Daniels office.
Daniel and his team were working tirelessly to uncover the identity of Kamsi's benefactor. The messages and contacts Bobby had sent from Kamsi's phone were being scrutinized for any clue. The urgency in the air was palpable. They knew this benefactor was powerful and dangerous. Daniel, growing impatient, decided to check on Kamsi in person. Upon arrival, the nurse greeted him with unexpected news. I was about to call you. Kamsi is out of the coma, but she's still very weak. You can talk to her, but keep it brief. Excited yet cautious, Daniel made his way to Kamsi's ward. As he approached her bed, he saw the fear and weariness in her eyes. Thank God you made it, he whispered. You were trying to mention the name of the benefactor before you became unconscious. Daniel urged, please tell me now. Kamsi shook her head weakly. It's not as easy as you think. The man is very powerful and dangerous. He has a web of connections everywhere. Daniel leaned closer. If you're ready to work with me, your safety is guaranteed. Who's the family member you are working with that told you JJ was allergic to tomatoes? Before Kamsi could answer, Daniel's phone rang. Annoyed, he glanced at the caller ID. It was a client, someone who couldn't be ignored. He excused himself and stepped out of the ward to take the call. As Daniel was leaving, Zara entered the ward, her face a mask of concern. I was told you were out of the coma. You got me so worried. How are you now? Kamsi, still visibly shaken, replied, I'm fine, but I'm not sure of my safety. Zara's expression hardened. If you are caught, you will be erased, she murmured. You must make sure to keep all the secrets. That's the only way to stay safe. Kamsi's eyes widened in fear. Are you aware that Mr. Davis is dead? The one at JJ's school? Zara nodded grimly. Yes, he was brought in dead from the police station. How did you know? Kamsi's fear deepened. Agatha was the first person that visited me when I became conscious. Oh, I see. Boss will go to any length to protect himself. Please stay alert. Kamsi shook her head. Okay, I will try. Please be careful too. Zara sighted Daniel coming back to the ward and asked who was the man that left here when I came in. He's a detective. His name is Daniel, Kamsi said in a weak voice. Just then, Daniel returned. His phone call concluded. He saw Zara leaving and asked Kamsi, who was that woman? She's Sasa's twin sister. Zara, Kamsi replied. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Zara. Huh? He rushed out to stop her, but she had already disappeared. That girl is also a suspect, he muttered to himself, frustration evident in his tone. Daniel knew he had to act quickly. He returned to his team at the station and relayed what he had learned. Zara is involved. We need to find her and figure out her role in all this. One of his team members, Officer Riley, looked up from the files. Should we issue a bolo? Daniel nodded. Bolo. Yes, be on the lookout, but discreetly. We can't afford to tip off the benefactor. This web is more tangled than we thought.
At the police station.
Inspector Pella guided Jack on what to say to JJ's captors, and Jack followed the instructions meticulously. The rendezvous was set in a secluded area, a location chosen by the kidnappers to ensure privacy and minimize police interference. As the phone call with the captors was ending, Jack demanded, "I need to talk to my son." There was a brief silence before a cold voice responded, "Of course, you can." A moment later, JJ's voice, trembling yet hopeful, came through. "Dad, are you coming for me today?" Jack's voice shook with emotion. "Yes, son, I'll be there soon." "Don't keep us waiting," the voice warned, "and remember, no police." The call ended, and Inspector Pella swiftly mobilized his team. Jack drove alone to the meeting point, but Pella had outfitted him with covert tracking and audio devices to monitor the situation. Upon arrival, Jack parked and waited nervously. A masked man emerged from the shadows, his presence ominous. "Do you have the signed documents?" he asked. Jack held up the documents, but kept a firm grip on them. "I'll hand these over once I see JJ." The masked man motioned, and JJ appeared. He ran to him with excitement. The sight of his son filled Jack with both relief and anguish. "Here," he said, extending the documents. The masked man snatched the papers and scrutinized the signatures. Satisfied, he nodded. "Release the boy." JJ sprinted toward his father, who scooped him up, holding him tightly. "It's okay, buddy, we're going home," Jack whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Jack carried JJ to the car and drove swiftly toward the airport, the hidden devices relaying their progress to Inspector Pella's team. Pella and his officers, hidden nearby, watched the kidnappers' movements closely. Once Jack and JJ were safely on their way, Pella issued orders. "Everyone, back to the station. We have a mole who will reveal the identity of their boss. We need to ensure Jack and JJ's safety."
At the police station.
Inspector Pella entered the interrogation room with renewed determination. William, the fake doctor, sat there, his demeanor more cooperative than before. "We need names," Pella said, his voice firm. "Who is behind this?" William, sweat trickling down his forehead, glanced nervously at the officers. Okay, I'll tell you. His name is." Officer Rex rushed in, urgency written all over his face. "Sir, your attention is needed immediately." Pella shot a warning glance at William, then dashed out of the interrogation room, his mind racing. Officer Rex continued. Dr. Glory called. "The substance William wanted to inject Sassa with is the same one found in the blood samples of Kamsi and Davis." Hearing this, Pella's face flushed with anger, his eyes blazing. He stormed back into the interrogation room, confronting William with barely contained fury. "You are a disgrace to the force," he spat. "This substance," he said, holding up a vial of evidence, "has been confirmed as the same one found in the blood samples of Kamsi and the other suspects." "So tell me," he demanded, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a menacing growl. Who are you working for, and why are you killing all the suspects? William's eyes widened with fear. He was about to speak when he suddenly remembered his boss's warning. If you are caught, you will be erased. His face went pale, and then he fainted, slumping in his chair. Pella's rage flared. Get up, he shouted, hitting the table. When there was no response, he realized something was seriously wrong. Call an ambulance. Now, he ordered. Inspector Pella, though still seething with anger, knew he needed to address Dr. Hakim. He invited him over to his office, taking a deep breath to calm himself. When Dr. Hakim arrived, Pella greeted him warmly, masking the turmoil within. Dr. Hakim, Pella began, his tone sincere, I want to personally thank you for everything you've done. Your efforts have been instrumental in uncovering a mole among us and in rescuing JJ. The information you provided about the document was crucial. Dr. Hakim nodded, a modest smile on his face. I'm just glad I could help. Pella continued, I need you to return to your duties at the hospital. Your expertise there is invaluable. But please, keep your past role as a police officer a secret for your own safety. This situation is far from over, and your anonymity could be a vital asset. Dr. Hakim nodded again, understanding the gravity of the request. Of course, Inspector, I'll be available anytime my services are needed. And thank you for your efforts in saving Sasa. She's very important to all of us. Pella's stern expression softened slightly. It's all part of the job. We're all in this together. Stay safe, Dr. Hakim, and take care of Sasa. As Dr. Hakim turned to leave, Pella called out, one more thing. Keep an eye on the hospital staff. If you notice anything suspicious, no matter how minor it seems, let me know immediately. Dr. Hakim agreed, his face resolute. I will, Inspector. You can count on me.
At the hospital.
As Dr. Hakim arrived at the hospital, he headed straight to Dr. Glory's office. Dr. Glory greeted him with a broad smile, her eyes reflecting the gratitude she felt. Dr. Hakim, she began, I can't express how relieved and thankful we all are for the vital role you played in saving Sasa. Though many doubted your intentions, you proved your dedication to her safety. Thank you for alerting everyone, which ultimately resulted in her rescue. Dr. Hakim nodded, a modest smile on his face. I'm just glad I could help. Dr. Glory placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Continue being the best version of yourself. Your contributions will never go unappreciated. You've made us proud, Dr. Hakim. Thank you. Feeling a surge of pride and relief, Dr. Hakim left her office and made his way to Sasa's ward to see her parents. As he entered, Bobby and Patricia looked up, their faces lighting up with gratitude. Hakim greeted them warmly. Bobby stood up and extended his hand. Dr. Hakim, thank you so much for saving our daughter. We can't express how grateful we are. Patricia added, her voice choked with emotion, you've been a blessing. May God continue to protect you. Hakim gave a reassuring smile. It's my pleasure and privilege to help. Sasa has dedicated her life to saving others. She deserves nothing less. Then, with a gentle tone, Hakim shared the good news. JJ has been rescued. He's safe now. Inspector Pella and his team are working tirelessly to bring those responsible to justice. A collective sigh of relief filled the room. Bobby's voice trembled with gratitude. Thank you, Doctor. You've been incredible through all of this. Hakim nodded, his smile reflecting the shared relief and hope. You're welcome. It's a team effort, and we will continue to do everything we can. He excused himself, sensing their need to process the relief and joy. As he left the ward, The hospital staff greeted him warmly, acknowledging his restored reputation. The news of his innocence, proven by the operation of the fake doctor, had spread rapidly. To be continued. Next on the Mysterious Twins Part 11. As Jack and JJ waited for their flight, JJ said he needed to use the restroom. Jack, determined not to let his son out of his sight, accompanied him and stood guard. Suddenly, 3 men burst into the restroom. "How dare you make changes to the documents, making the agreement invalid?" one of the men snarled as they tied Jack up. The other man grabbed JJ, and the two quickly fled the scene.